What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the By the Horns podcast presented by Toyota. Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand, so find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. Cam Smith rocking with my man Drew Stevens of the Bigs, coming to you as we close out the calendar year of 2024, and the Bulls did it in a very dramatic fashion. So look, we got a lot of things coming everybody's way for this final podcast for 2024 on the Chicago Sports Network for the By the Horns podcast. We're talking, obviously, what happened tonight as we record this podcast on a Monday night in Charlotte against the Charlotte Hornets. We have a year in review, player that glowed up the most in the calendar year. And since it's a special week in the city of Chicago, and really for basketball fans all over the world, the Chicago Bulls will honor the legend, the icon, Derrick Rose, Saturday night, January 4th, at the United Center. We've heard some things going on out there of what could happen that night. I'm not going to speak on that because I'm not trying to get ourselves in trouble when it comes to the powers that be, but we are expecting the special night with Derrick Rose. But leading up to that is going to be a lot of great content, interviews with Derrick's inner circle, some of his former teammates at Simeon, of course, some of his former teammates with the Chicago Bulls. CHSN has released on YouTube. If you go to CHSN on YouTube, a very dope interview with Derrick Rose and Joakim Noah, two great friends, one of the best duos in Chicago sports history, looking back on some of their favorite moments as teammates during their tenure with the Bulls. A great just time and era of Bulls basketball. So go check that out. Go watch that. I guarantee you will love it. And it's going to be just that candid conversation that D Rose and Joakim always have. So it's kind of like you are like a fly on the wall in that situation, having them go back down memory lane. But speaking of dynamic duos, my man Drew Stevens, hopefully the holiday was good for you and Christmas and you got some gifts and you enjoyed family. I did the same thing, man, so it was good. So let's kind of quickly, and I'm not going to say quickly, but let's just go through this Bulls win because they finished off the calendar year with a win in Charlotte. Had to play some extra basketball to get this win. It was the first overtime game for the Bulls this year, and it was a lot of firsts. First overtime game, first time in franchise history that they had 63 three-point attempts. First time for Patrick Williams that he's hit 5 threes in a basketball game as a Chicago Bulls. So a lot going on. Kobe White 1 assist shy of his first career triple-double, but Kobe White and Patrick Williams for sure back home. Carolina boys from North Carolina showed up and showed out for the hometown crowd and the family and friends in attendance. But the Bulls get the win, 115-108 in Charlotte. Drew, you look at that game and you're like, okay, both teams shot horribly. Let's just be real about that. You know, we give it to everybody straight no chaser on the By the Horns podcast, along with the Charlotte Hornets. It was just a bad shooting night. But you found some way to win. In the NBA, you got to have nights where you just find a way to win. Even though it's going to be ugly, as long as it ends in a win, then you're good to go.
The Bulls were missing Zach LaVine. Charlotte Hornets were missing a great number of their regular players. So, I mean, the Bulls, this is a win that they should have been able to get. You think that it wouldn't necessarily wind up being this close and they'd have to kind of eke out a win in Charlotte, but They escaped with one. They finished the month of December 7-5. They're now 15-18, one game better than they were last season at this point in time. Their bench kind of really pulled them through. I mean, you hit on it. Patrick made some shots down the stretch. Kobe made some shots down the stretch. But their bench, particularly Torrey Craig, Billy Donovan, dusted the old Wiley vet off and brought him into the game.
And he always stays ready. Like that's a vet. Like we saw that with Javon Carter and just him just having one of the best games of his NBA career and what he was able to do, just being thrusted into a rotation spot and just going proviso East Javon Carter in that ball game that we saw the other night.
Yeah. What did he finish? 5 or 7 from 3 tonight? Yeah. Torrey Craig. So, good performance from him. Maybe it's a low-key audition for other teams. Even though I think, other teams know what you're getting in guys like Torrey Craig and Javon Carter. But, I can't help but to be a little irked. Might not be the right word, but Torrey Craig played about double the minutes that Modest and Julian Phillips played.
Yeah.
And while we know that this season was going to be more about winning than it is development, not to say that development doesn't matter at all to the Bulls, because we know that it does, but I think winning has taken precedence over that. And they made that be known from day one, media day. But it doesn't jive with everything that this team has at stake for it and its future, to be playing Torrey Craig that many more minutes than two forwards on your team that you hope are going to be here for at least part of the foreseeable future. We have to see what's going to happen as we inch closer to February 6th. But again, Billy Donovan's in the business of winning. These players are in the business of winning. Right. So it's not to take anything away from them. It's more of a conversation about just the bigger picture and what's at stake for the future.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, man. Just kind of looking at what the bench was able to do, along with Torrey Craig. You had Jalen Smith, who had a solid game as well, 11 points, 5 rebounds. You throw in just 5 points from Dalen Terry. Obviously, Modest had a couple points with himself on the basket. You had Taylor Horton-Tucker. Lonzo, plus 26 with a plus-minus. If plus-minus does anything for anybody, that's a love language for certain people when it comes to plus-minus and all of that. Like, I get it, to each their own, but it's a good thing, especially when it's at plus 26 for a guy in Lonzo, and what he was able to do. Actually, to be corrected, plus 25 for Lonzo in the 26 minutes that he played tonight in Charlotte. So again, plus minus is your thing. Go ahead, man. I know all the analytical people out there, that's a love language to y'all. I get it, but I just like to use my eyes with guys out there playing instead of looking at the numbers. But again, that's what the NBA is today. But Lonzo was a nice positive for the Chicago Bulls team, along with other guys off the bench, like you talked about with Torrey Craig, and as I mentioned with Jalen Smith. So I think the good thing about this Bulls team, and to your point of Torrey Craig getting more minutes than Modest, plus 11 more minutes than Modest tonight. And when you look at with Dalen Terry, just a couple more minutes than Dalen. Dalen was able to do some things defensively and provide that spark and hustle that the Bulls needed for them off the bench. But it felt like tonight was Billy Donovan saying, look, Torrey, we need you. You got it going. You know what to do in these situations. It was a weird game where shots weren't being made. We got to find a way to win. Let me insert a guy that's a veteran, that has been in these situations before, that understands how to make the right play. And it wasn't just scoring with Torrey Craig. He assisted with Jalen Smith on a big dunk as well in transition. So it's just like the little things that Torrey Craig does that allowed the Bulls to put themselves in a position to get the W. So I understand it from that standpoint with Billy. And I don't think moving forward is going to be a situation where you see Modest's minutes drop, because Billy's in a situation where Torrey Craig needs to play more as you look towards the future with his franchise and pushing it forward and how they want to build, because obviously Modest is one of the young pieces and cornerstones of this franchise moving forward. But it felt like just tonight that Billy D said, look, we in Charlotte, we trying to finish off 2024 with a win. Torrey, go do your thing, man, and go play ball, because we need to get a win.
Basically, that's really what it was. Billy kind of searching. And again, if I'm the coach, if I'm worried about wins, which I would think most coaches, if not all coaches are, no matter what level they're coaching on, they're going to try to put their best players or the guys they feel are their best players that can make things happen into the game. We know Torrey Craig is one of those guys on this team. But again, it just goes to kind of I'll use the word disconnect, not necessarily with the organization, but just in the sense of what a lot of people view this season as and what it should be in comparison to how it's going to this point in the year. But they get a victory. Right. What's this 2-game winning streak now that they're on going into 2025? So, good for them.
It's a good look. It's a good look for sure. I mean, especially for guys like Patrick Williams, that you start to see him get his legs underneath him a little bit more, right? 5 of 10 from 3, something for sure that you start to see him being more aggressive. And that's been always a lot of fans and just expectation for him is just wanting him to be aggressive offensively. And he's done that, especially with a shot from the perimeter. But tonight was one of those nights where it was timely threes, but also he was efficient with his threes. So shout out to P. Will for what he was able to do and finishing with 17 points with his Bulls team. But you talk about just, trying to get a win and looking at this Bulls team and what they're able to do in the month of December. As you mentioned, they finished 7-5, won 7 of the 12 games. But looking at some of the, not to throw shade at some of the lower tier teams in the NBA that the Bulls faced off against this month. But still, a win is a win in the NBA, no matter who it's against, especially when it's on the road. But I'm looking at the matchups against the Boston Celtics, against the Milwaukee Bucks twice, and they played both of those teams twice. So you go into those games and you finish, in my opinion, 500, which, looking at Milwaukee and how they've been better, right, especially after the first, I would say about month and a half of the season, where they were catching hell and fire from everyone just because they didn't look the part. They just were trying to figure out what was going on. Then they started to hit a stride. They turned things around. They ended up winning the Emirates NBA Cup, and you just saw them in a nice groove. But this Bulls team split with them. I know that Giannis and Dame didn't play in the first game, and Drew were at that ball game at the United Center. That was on a Monday. Wasn't one of the best performances of the Bulls, but we got to give them credit because they bounced back that Saturday later on in the week and got a win against the Bucks. And we saw Josh Giddey defensively have one of his best defensive games. I'm not even going to say of the season, of his career, really, against Chris Middleton, especially late in what he was able to do in those crunch time minutes. And he also finished with a double-double. But the Bulls get that win with Damian Lillard back on the court. And Dame was Dame in terms of the shots that he was able to make. But still, he had to work for all of his points. And that's a credit to the Bulls guards and the Bulls defensively. So you look at that game, they get that win. Of course, they split with the Boston Celtics and getting that win against them. So you have those moments against these teams where you see the good of this group come out when they play collectively. Of course, when shots are being made, that's always a big component, no matter who you're talking about. But we started this month on the By the Horns podcast looking at December like it could get spicy for this group. But for them to finish above 500 is a nice nod to, as a team, keeping their focus, staying together despite the amount of injuries. Like we saw Zach miss some games. Of course, Josh missed some games. Lonzo, P. Will, all of those guys. But still, as a unit, they were able to keep their heads above water.
They were. I mean, from the outside looking in, they really do seem to enjoy playing with each other.
Yeah.
And this style of play that they've adopted this season has to be fun to play. I mean, I know it's not always the most entertaining brand of basketball to watch, particularly on a night like tonight where the Bulls and Hornets combined to miss 75 threes, the same number that they combined to miss on December 13th. So it's not always the most entertaining to watch, particularly when, a lot of missed shots are happening. Right. But to be able to play that style, that up-tempo pace where, the ball is popping, the ball is humming, you're kind of guaranteed to get a certain number of shots a game, and you're sharing the ball like they tend to do. Obviously, on nights where shots are falling, things look and I'm sure feel much better. But, this is the team that's going to go out there and give it their all. And they believe that, they can compete with every team in the league. This 7-5 record that they do have, they took advantage of a little bit of a soft schedule. You mentioned the 2 games they had against the Celtics and the Bucks. They also played 2 against these Hornets. They played the Nets, the Spurs, Pacers, Raptors, Hawks. So, there was room for them there was some runway there for them to make up some ground. Right. That maybe they had, let go of leading into this month. And, to their credit, to the players' credit, to the coaching staff credit, they were able to do that.
Yeah, no doubt about that, man. So the Bulls finish out the calendar year of 2024 with a W. You love to see that for sure, just for the vibes, obviously, with this team and coming off of just some situations where it was looking a little bleak. You were worried about going into that Saturday game against Milwaukee, like, all right, what team is going to show up? Because we saw the previous couple of games with this group. But again, they kept their heads above water, finished the month above 500, winning 7 of the 12 games. So as we start to put a bow on the calendar year of 2024, as I teased earlier when we started the By the Horns podcast, Drew and I are going to walk you through some of our favorite moments from this Bulls team from when the calendar year started in 2024 to where we are finishing off now. So not only moments, but players that have glowed up and just little things that stood out to us about this franchise that you can kind of take and move forward with, right? So, Drew, let's start it here, because when you look at this team and what they were to begin the calendar year of 2024. So against the Philadelphia 76ers, a team a few days prior to this game had knocked out. In fact, this was almost a back-to-back, right? Home and home series with the Philadelphia 76ers. Started off with a tough road loss in Philly, and looking at the box score and remembering that game, it's like, man, thinking about DeMar DeRozan in that Bulls uniform and what he was. You have a guy that obviously is one of the better two guards and will go down, in my opinion, as one of the more underrated two guards and shooting guards in this era of the NBA. I'm not going to say NBA history, because you start to get into some murky situations, because people are going to say, okay, how's he one of the best or most underrated two guards in NBA history? What about this player, that player? So I'm like, I'm not even going to go there and open up Pandora's box. So I'll just say in this era, in his playing career. But for you, Drew, what's that moment that stands out for you throughout this year of 2024 with this Bulls team?
It's probably Kobe White's 42-point performance in the first playoff game against the Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah.
It was the culmination of his most improved player runner-up campaign that he was having. Mm-hmm. It was his glow-up, as you described it. A lot of talk about Kobe White coming into last season was, what's his ceiling? What kind of player can he be? He's so streaky. Will he ever find the shiftiness to add to that north-south penetrating game that he's always had?
Right.
And he played pretty phenomenally. Had some spurts in there, like he always seems to have, where he goes through some shooting slumps. But in my mind, and I'll die on this hill, because no one was talking about Kobe White last year in the same breath as the players who were mentioned as being most improved player candidates, I feel like he almost deserved it just off the strength of that. Like, nobody was talking about Kobe White. All due respect to Tyrese Maxey, he had a phenomenal season as well, all-star. But, Kobe White just really came out of nowhere, and to me, really embodied what the most improved player award should be. Like, this guy is, what was he, in his fifth season last year?
Mm-hmm.
Like, nobody expected him to have that kind of jump. And for him to play the way he did last season, man, it was one of the high marks of the year, if not the high mark in my mind, dating back to last season.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, because he was thrust into a position where he had to grow. He had no choice, because Zach LaVine went out and his season ended with that foot injury that required surgery. So you're looking at a guy that played under 30 games. And now if you're DeMar DeRozan, as I mentioned, with the calendar year and going back to how it started against Philly, but this is way before that, obviously, with Zach's injury, you're like, okay, who's going to be my duo? Who's going to be my second guy that can help me out when it comes to scoring the basketball? If we get in tight situations, who's going to be that other guard? And not to dismiss Nikola Vucevic, because we know Vooch is Vooch, like Mr. Double-Double. That should be his nickname. That should be his hashtag on social media. That should be on the back of his license plate. Like, that's what it should be, because Vooch is that dude. But when it comes to another guard that can play make, that can score, get to the rim, but also that can stretch the defense out and shoot the ball, Kobe White was the best option. And really, looking at the team, was ultimately the best option for that group when it comes to just all three levels and his ability to make shots. And again, we know that he's streaky, but still, when it comes to scouting reports and guys having that respect of luck, you can't leave him open. I know the numbers don't show it, but let's not allow Kobe White to be Kobe White. And Atlanta found out the hard way in the play-in in the calendar year, where we go back to last year when he dropped 42 points on the head, as you mentioned, Drew. But now he has to play make with the basketball in his hands. And this is a nod to Kobe and just his work ethic. We've heard players rave about what he does in the offseason of putting in the work, but especially when it comes to his ball handling. And it was a culmination of that work that when he was thrust in that position to handle the basketball in more of a half-court game, and just the style of play and pace for that Bulls was more of a slowdown because of DeMar on that team. And Billy Donovan has said this. We've said this on the By the Horns podcast, that it's not a knock to DeMar. It's just like you have to play to what your personnel is. And this was a more half-court team. But you saw Kobe being able to get downhill and make plays. And you saw ultimately his growth as a basketball player, which you want to see, right? I mean, so many guys just have their growth stunted, one, because they're maybe not playing as much or they're not getting as many opportunities. But for Kobe and Zach going down is a blessing in disguise for him, along with speaking with DeMar, working with DeMar, the conversations that he's had with Zach, the conversations that he's had with Billy, the conversations that he's had with his entire team saying, look, we need you to score. We need you to shoot the ball. If you don't shoot the ball, then we're about to curse you out. I almost cursed myself, but it's like one of those things as a hooper, you know this, when you got a guy that can shoot, that's as talented as Kobe, or that has that talent where they can just score at will and make it look effortless. You're looking at them like, dude, do this all the time. Like, don't hesitate. You got the green light, bro. We need you to shoot.
Drano from Sunset Park.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So the crowd out there that is watching the By the Horns podcast on YouTube, or if you're listening, wherever you get your podcast, all the hoop heads out there know this. And if you know hoop movies, then yeah, you know Sunset Park for sure. Because you know the scene where Drano catches the ball and everybody's like, Drano, shoot the ball, shoot it. Throws it up and knocks it down. It's like, all right, cool. Like,
nothing but net.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I got a gripe with the league, man, because you can look these numbers up on Basketball Reference. You can look up Kobe White's performance in these playing game, but they really don't exist. They don't count. So even though he scored a career high 42 points, it really doesn't exist. But it just doesn't make sense because the play-in tournament exists, and if a team advances from the play-in tournament to the playoffs, obviously that exists. So why don't these numbers count? They shouldn't be just meaningless stats that just are floating off somewhere in the ether. Like, they deserve to be recognized, I think, especially when he had the game that he had. And you mentioned analytics earlier, so I'm a bore, hopefully not bore you in the audience for a second, but to put that into perspective, Basketball Reference uses an advanced metric called game score, which basically calculates a player's productivity in a single game. Now, it doesn't account for pace, but it ranks it on a scale, let's say, from 1 to 40.
Okay.
40 is like an outstanding performance. Kobe's game score was a 41 in that game.
Damn. Yeah. Okay. All right.
His regular, in the counting stats, the ones that quote unquote actually do exist, his highest game score of his career is 32.1. So we're talking about 41 and 32.1, just to kind of give a little more perspective to just the lights out performance he had in that one game in the play-in tournament.
All right, man. Somebody tag Adam Silver and let him know we're campaigning to get those numbers from Kobe White legitimized in the NBA, because that career high 42 points. I mean, we were both in the building for that, and it was electric. Like, I have videos from that, just in terms of the energy to start the game with everybody with the playoff towels, which I love. I don't care what sport it is. But if I see fans out there, just that aerial view of fans waving those playoff towels, but to be in the United Center when that was happening and understand the magnitude of what this Bulls team had in front of them and how they seized that moment against the Atlanta Hawks, it was a special time. But also, to add to that special time was just seeing Kobe do his thing. It was like, all right, this is that, and this is another movie reference. This is what we do on the By the Horns podcast for that seasoned crowd out there. Maybe we're trying to give some knowledge to the younger people out there. And I hate saying younger people because that makes me sound even older, Drew, but it's there. So I can't do anything about it. But it was like Bruce Leroy in The Last Dragon, man, with Kobe, the 42-point performance against the Atlanta Hawks. If you remember those final scenes in The Last Dragon when he was fighting Shonuff, and Shonuff is trying to drown Bruce Leroy in that water. And Bruce Leroy is going all through these flashbacks of like, everybody's been trying to hint towards telling me that I've always had it. I just have to step into it and realize it. And when Shonuff finally raised him up out of that water, Drew, and the water went back in slow-mo, and Shonuff was like, all right, who's the master? Bruce Leroy looked at him like, I am. So that's what Kobe stepped into, and he had the orange glow around him and everything around the hair. And Kobe's got more the Shonuff hair than the Bruce Leroy hair. With that, but it's like, dude, step into your glow, hone that, and you will be even higher in terms of what your status is in the NBA. And I'm with you. Should have won NBA's Most Improved. I get it with Tyrese Maxey, what he stepped into in that situation in Philly and turned himself into a 1A type dude with the 76ers because of Joel Embiid and his health concerns. But Maxey, first-time All-Star. Kobe could have got a nod in that as well because his numbers were there. But still, you have one of the dudes that at his size, and we saw it tonight, can attack the rim, catch a body and get a dunk, stretch his game out from three, and just punish you offensively in so many different ways that you look up and like, damn, he went 7 of 9 from three, and he had 8 assists, and he had 7 rebounds and 38. Like, okay, well, he's Kobe White. So yeah. I'm with you. That glow up for me, for sure, was something that was special. But I'm just going to do this, man, and keep it with the Bulls guards. And this is, before I say this, we got to give love to one Zach LaVine, who was able to bounce back from foot surgery. Obviously went down early last season. And this was before the calendar year flipped to 2024. But him getting back to the Zach that we knew, that is one of the more lethal scorers in the NBA. For sure, a guy that is a two-time All-Star, an Olympic gold medalist. Like, Zach is solidified with his status in the NBA. So he's had a hell of a season. Nikola Vucevic, we talked about him, Mr. Double-Double, and what he's been able to do in this time in that Bulls uniform. Just somebody that's always been consistent. So we're going to give them love, but I'm focusing on just Lonzo Ball. Like, and this is, for me, a glow up in a guy that was going through it, man. Like, he didn't know if he was going to be able to play basketball again, and to even take it to a bigger scale and a bigger level. Wasn't sure on how he was going to be able to run around and play with his kids again, right? Like, that's a scary situation for a guy that played basketball probably since the time that he can remember. And that's just something that he loves to do. And that was taken away from him for 2.5 years, right? So you have a guy that had a one-of-a-kind surgery. I think that when we go back through time, not even go back, but move forward in time, people are going to get the Lonzo procedure or the Lonzo Ball procedure when it comes to what he was able to do with his knee and getting that taken care of. But as we mentioned at the start of the show, plus 25 and the plus minus for the analytical people out there. But just when you go back to him in New Orleans and his impact defensively and just how he was just geeked to play basketball. Like, you could tell he was just thirsty to hoop, and I get it. Like, I would be the same way if I was Lonzo. But just the ovation that he received with the Bulls' first home game against the Oklahoma City Thunder when he played that ball game, and just the love that he received. And he was just out there just playing free like he always plays. But it's just great to see him be able to return back to the Lonzo Ball that we knew. And I think there's even more growth for him with his game. And he's not fully 100% back to the Lonzo that we saw when he first came to Chicago Bulls and had them as the best team in the Eastern Conference in those first 20 to 25 games. But this is a dude for sure that not only regained his love of the game, but just it feels like it's therapy for Lonzo being out there on the court again.
We can't ever say enough about just this journey that we've watched him be on, and where he is today, and just the fearlessness he played with to start this season that we seem to continue to play with to this point as we record this pod here on a Monday night. Like, this dude is calling for lobs. He's trying to get chased down blocks. He's putting himself in the thick of things, trying to get 50-50 balls, and just his impact on this team. Like, he creates scoring opportunities with his defense and obviously his vision. Everything looks just the same it did before he got hurt, except for maybe his shot. And I don't know if some of that is due to him still kind of getting his legs under him, as well as that wrist injury that he suffered a few games into the season. So he's had some setbacks with that in mind. But I mean, other than that, like, this guy he's like the Terminator out there, man. He seeks the ball and he just locates it. He gets to it faster than everybody else somehow. Starts breaks, lives, passes up to his teammates, and he puts on the show when he's out there, man. He really does.
Yeah. And he's also challenging Josh Giddey with his arsenal of Kobe's too. So Josh, look, you got to watch your back, man, because Lonzo's bringing some heat with those Kobe's, and it feels like, that first day of school when you lay out that outfit on the bed, first day of school, like, oh, I'm gonna kill him tomorrow. It feels like Lonzo laid out all of his Kobe's in his house before the season. Like, okay, I'm gonna wear these. When we get back to United Center, these will be the first home games. These are going to be the first ones that I wear when we're on the road. And he's bringing out the arsenal. And again, it goes back to the point that we've hit on of him just being back to doing something that he loves. So that's the glow up for me with Lonzo and what we've seen from the calendar year in 2024. So shout out to Kobe White, Lonzo Ball, our picks for the glow up for 2024. I think we agree on the game that stands out, and that's the playing game against the Atlanta Hawks. Again, home game for the Bulls. Super electric night, super electric crowd. The playoff towels were there. You saw career high from Kobe White, and it does count. NBA, Adam Silver. Somebody tag Adam Silver and say, look, you need to be listening to the Battle Horns podcast presented by Toyota. But then also, too, Drew and Cam are telling you to legitimize what Kobe did that night against the Atlanta Hawks in the play. So we're agreement on that. But let's move it forward because, as I mentioned at the start, it's Derrick Rose week in the city of Chicago. January 4th, 2025 at the United Center, Saturday night, and it's against his former coach and Tom Thibodeau, who was a part of a special era of the Chicago Bulls in helping lead that team to, I hate to do this, but it's like that what could have been situation with the Bulls, but it's not a what could have been when it comes to what Derrick Rose was able to do with that Bulls uniform. We know what he was able to do, and that's be the number one overall pick from the city of Chicago to play for his hometown, but then also be the youngest NBA MVP in league history. And I was watching some highlights of his first career playoff game, his rookie season, against the Boston Celtics. Doc Rivers coaching them, Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce in the Boston Garden, TD Garden for all of the people that are like, oh, it's not the Garden, it's TD Garden. Yeah, okay, whatever. Rajon Rondo, Tony Allen, Big Baby Davis, like that entire defensive unit was legit.
Mm-hmm.
But now you have the number one overall pick with that pressure saying, hey, stoic as always. I don't care if you got 3 Hall of Famers. To hell with them. I'm about to give your point guard 36. Help my team get this win, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that tunnel vision. It's that Chicago. Like he understood what the assignment was, but he's looking at that one goal he has in mind to do whatever needs to be done to get his team a victory in that case, in that season, in his career. And we saw that play out. Obviously, we wish things could have happened differently in his career. Him and Penny Hardaway, man, no shades to Grant Hill or Brandon Roy's of the world, but him and Penny Hardaway, man, are the two players in my mind that I just wish I could take that slider, that injury slider, all the way down and make it non-existent just to see what those two would have done.
I see what you're doing. You're speaking to the 2K crowd. I see.
Hey, you got to inclusion, man.
We're definitely going to include everybody. I mean, we included the analytics crowd with the plus minuses. Hey. Now we're including the 2K crowd, the gamers out there, man. So we got all bases covered for everybody. We got what you need on the Battle Horns podcast. But I'm with you, man. You think about what could have been, but as much as you can do that, I like to lean on what we've seen from Derrick and just the amount of greatness that we saw from him in his time as a Chicago Bull. And I think also what's impressive to me is that how he was able to revive his career and finish it out on his terms, right? He had different stops, obviously, throughout the NBA, but still it was a guy that he said it himself, that when he was injured and he found himself trying to find out who he was, like that was kind of almost, I'm not going to say a blessing in disguise, but it was needed for him to grow, that he wouldn't be the person that he is today if that injury doesn't happen to him. But still at the same time, when you think about just the amount of pride, not only that Derrick has for the city of Chicago, but also the amount of pride that we as Chicagoans have for D Rose. Yeah. And, we call him Pooh in the city. So let's just go ahead and move it forward and just call him Pooh the rest of the way on the By the Horns podcast before we finish this off, Drew, just to show our respect to him. But I remember the first time that I heard about Pooh, and it was my older brother calling me when I was in college. Mm-hmm. And he's like, man, I'm watching the city championship, and I think I just seen the fastest dude with the basketball since Jason Kidd. And I'm on the phone like, wait a minute. Okay, wait, what? He was like, man, this dude, Derrick Rose for Simeon, look, as soon as he gets the ball, he's out. He's gone. And so I'm like, all right, cool. So I see some things. I get back to the city, talk to a few people, and I'm like, yeah, bro, you didn't lie. When I saw Pooh the first time live, it was like, okay, if you blinked, and I literally am being for real, if you blinked, you would miss what he was doing. I mean, you remember the highlights with the Bulls, but when he was with Simeon and just raw, super athletic, just doing his thing, it was like, dog, what am I watching right now? You are different. It's 3 guys that I've seen in Chicago, and I'm going back to, I'm an 80s baby, so I'll go back to when I can vividly remember watching basketball. I would say 91, 92. And if you're Chicago and you understand this, like we're raised differently when it comes to basketball, especially playing in the city. Like we start off playing as soon as we get out the womb, but some of those memories can start back to 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old. So mine was around like age 6. And so looking at a lot of different guys like Michael Herman, I remember him and what he was able to do at King High School. And I'm just talking specifically on high school basketball players in the city of Chicago. Man. But there are 3 dudes for me that I'm like, this is not real. And 2 came in the same season, Ronnie Fields and Kevin Garnett back in 95, and the shows that they will put on for Farragut Academy. I didn't have that feeling again until I saw Pooh as Simeon. And I know that's a lot and this is no disrespect to all of the cats that came out of Chicago, like Quentin Richardson, Edwin Young, like Amari Sawyer, like Shannon Brown from Proviso East, like so many guys, Chicago City, Chicago area.
Fenwick.
Oh, Corey Maggette from Fenwick, like, and even this Will the Thrill, Sharon Collins, like it's a lot of dudes that are and were super talented as hell that were in the league, had their time in the league, but also went on to do some great things in college. But that feeling of watching Ronnie Fields and Kevin Garnett and just like, yeah, this is a special moment right now. I need to hone in and lock in and vividly remember this stuff because I doubt I'll ever see it again. But I did see it again, and it was when Pooh was at Simeon.
There's two things. Well, of course, there are a number of plays that just kind of flash in your mind when you think of Pooh. 2 things though are, one, before his MVP season at media day, him calling his shot before the season started. Why can't I be MVP? Why not me? I work hard. I'm just as good as the other guys. And he goes out there and he leads the Bulls to a 62-20 victory, a berth in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Miami Heat and the Heatles, who Joakim Noah famously called Hollywood as hell. Like, we know that he's this reserved, quiet guy. And for him to just come out with that proclamation, just like, man, why can't it be me? Again, right. Calling his shot well before the season started. This isn't like mid-season, like, hey, I deserve to be MVP. I'll put up these numbers. No, this is before things got started. This isn't front running. I think that stands out. But then also just the man that he's become in the sense of, you look at things that people go through and you may sometimes put yourself or try to put yourself in their shoes and think, what would you do in certain situations? For him to have suffered the amount of injuries that he did, to have suffered so many setbacks, to have lost what made him such a unicorn as a basketball player. We never got to see his prime because injuries robbed us of that. For him to continue to rehab the way he did, to bounce around the league to several different teams, to drop 50 points as a member of the Minnesota Timberwolves. I can't imagine the ride that was for him and the amount of times that he may have wanted to tap out and be like, man, it's not worth me continuing to go through this. So for him to have stayed in the league as long as he did, to him to have the impact in New York that second time around, where he was pretty much their best player in that series or in that playoff run that they had that ended to, I want to say, the Atlanta Hawks, if not mistaken. It was just awesome to watch, and that's something that sticks in my mind now, just how at peace he grew to be. Because I don't know if I were in his shoes, if I would be able to react that way. So I think, I commend him for the journey that he's been on, that he's riding, he's continuing to ride, and just all that he's persevered through.
Yeah. And through that, just looking inwardly to better himself and use himself. And as I'm not going to say an example, because I love to say this about Pooh. And when you think of everything that he accomplished, the expectation that was placed on him, and you know how we do in Chicago, Drew, when it comes to basketball, when somebody's like dubbed the next dude, the entire city comes out, not only to see, okay, we're going to see if he's real or not, But then two, once we find out that he's real, okay, cool. We're going to boast and brag to everybody else that we know in the country and worldwide. Like, yeah, Chicago's got one, whether that's if you got people in New York, if you got people in LA, obviously people in Texas, just the Midwest. Like, all right, you think it's sweet, but we got one of our own that's going to do some special things.
Yeah.
And him being able to become a symbol. And this is where my kind of love for, Marvel and DC and superheroes in general come into play, because those superheroes are viewed as a symbol. And I view Derrick as that, as a symbol and a superhero. But he is a symbol for the city of Chicago and a symbol for the basketball world, to your point of how you can overcome those obstacles, how you can overcome those setbacks, and not ultimately just return back to the basketball court and be a basketball player, but it's to become a better man, to become a better person. And that's the dope thing about Derrick, about Pooh, that we love, is that, look, we saw him go through the fire. We saw him emerge from the fire and be better. And to have him being embraced this week and how he will be embraced on Saturday, January the 4th, it's going to be special. It's going to be very emotional for a lot of people. And I'm not just talking about Derrick. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, with anybody that gets emotional, because again, with where he came from, who he is, the percentages, the really just the odds of him being able to make it out where he's from in Chicago. And Drew, we know what it is. You're from the South Side, I'm from the West Side. Like, those odds are very slim to not only make it out, but also do the things that Pooh was able to do and achieve. It's like, dog, you need to be celebrated because you've overcome so much and you became better at that. But always he represented Chicago with pride and never embarrassed Chicago, especially when you go back to his first All-Star appearance. And I was in Dallas covering that with him and talking to him, and you know how certain people came out during the starting five and were dancing around, and Derrick just looked at him like, man, I don't know what they're doing, but look, yeah, hey, yep, Derrick Rose, yep, that's me. How y'all doing? Yeah, right. I'm not all with the extra stuff. Like, that's just not how I'm built. So you have those situations where you're like, yeah, that makes you proud as a Chicagoan to say he represents us, and he represents parts of the city of Chicago that we know are similar to our upbringing and where we came from and where we play basketball, who we play basketball against. So that's the special thing of Pooh.
He's ours. He's ours. The same way that Isaiah Thomas was and is ours. I know because of the Pistons Bulls rivalry, a lot of people may not agree with that, may not ever get over that, but he is ours. Same way Candace Parker is ours. Same way Monica Gonzalez is ours. I can go on and on. Derrick Rose lived the dream that many childhood hoopers from Chicago aspire to do themselves. Like, he lived that. It's so dope that he was able to live that dream, and we can look at him, kids can look at him and aspire to be the player that he was. And I saw that on Saturday, the Bulls and Knicks players are going to be wearing shirts with 1/4/25 on them to commemorate the date of Derrick Rose night, but also the numbers that he wore for the Bulls, Knicks, and at Simeon. And that's dope. That is really dope, man. Yeah.
It's like a mix and culmination of a lot of things, like the synergy of those numbers. And just those conversations. If you listen to Derrick, he's a deep dude. He does a lot of reading, and again, like, loves playing chess. And this is also a thing. I saw Victor Wembanyama playing chess in New York City. The NBA put that out on social. I'm like, and Wemby said that, like, the NBA should have a chess tournament. And the first person I thought of was Pooh. Like, yeah, Pooh should be definitely in the chess tournament. I know he's not an active NBA player, obviously, because he retired, but it would be dope to have that. So NBA, if you copyright this, then I'm like, dang, I should have did something with that. But, you know, don't piggyback off my idea. But at the end of the day, if you do it, it's cool. But he's special, man. He's special. And you said that he's ours. We protect him like he's ours. And Chicago's are very protective over a lot of things when it comes to food, when it comes to music, when it comes to just Chicago history, right? Shout out to our guy, Six Figure Dilla, who does some great Chicago history, and just saying the T-shirts that he has and everything dope about America comes from Chicago. Like, it's like those things are super, super special. And you have another person that definitely made his mark, not only in the city, but just the basketball world.
And I got to shout out the bigs, especially the founders, Eugene McIntosh and Terrence Tomlin, because of the relationship they established with Derrick at a time when, there were some things, some people in the media who, maybe didn't give Derrick Rose a fair shake or, perceived him to be something that he wasn't. And that relationship that Eugene, Terrence, and Derrick share, I think that helped kind of foster what we see in him today, where he is a little bit more relaxed around the media. It can be more of himself, show more of himself to people. So shout out to those guys. Shout out to the founders. Yeah,
shout out to the bigs, Eugene McIntosh and Terrence Tomlin. Just, man, we appreciate you for, again, we talked about how we protect Derrick as ours. Like, it's the same thing there with that. Like, we got to protect him because you understand how special he is. I'm not going to say he was in past tense because he's still with us and that protection still moves forward. So it's going to be a lot of love, a lot of emotion, a lot of just, man, damn, yeah, I remember that. Like, I'm going to be in the United Center as will you, Drew, and I'll be thinking back about when he was awarded NBA MVP during that ceremony with the late David Stern and sitting there in the 100 section with my brother. And in that moment, like, man, that's us. That's us up there, the city of Chicago raising up the MVP trophy, right? And you said this, and you made a nice point of Derrick living every Chicago Hooper's dream. And Isaiah Thomas said that, like, who was a dude that lived every Chicago Hooper's dream? To be the number 1 overall pick, to play for your hometown, to really put it on even a bigger map because you're from the city of Chicago, and do it your way and become the youngest NBA MVP in league history. So icon, symbol, legend, whatever high-ranking title you want to give him, he's deserving of that and even go higher with it. So you're going to see a lot coming this way on the Chicago Sports Network via podcast like we're doing right now on the By the Horns, of course, with our staple of shows that we have on the Chicago Sports Network. The show that I'm on, the Chicago Lead, is going to have a nice hour special later on this week, focusing in on Derrick with interviews with some of his former Simeon teammates and Tim Flowers. I had a nice one-on-one conversation with him that you will definitely love because it gives insight into how Derrick is an even better person than he is basketball player. And I think people need to be reminded of that when it comes to Derrick and who he is, that the basketball component is great. We just touched on everything with that, Drew, and the amount of time that we have on the pod. But the stories of him off the court, even back in the day, to how family was everything and how he looked out for his family and friends, and for people that didn't have, he tried to help out with as little as he did have to help them out. But then some things that he does off the court even now, like a lot of things that aren't being broadcasted or highlighted in the press, of him donating money and doing different things to help families out. Like, those are the stories where you look, it's like, it's not about the cameras and the press and the media for him. He does it because that's who he is and that's his roots. That's how he was raised. So shout out to his mother, Brendan Rose, and raising him and his family how she did. And again, man, it's going to be a special week in the city of Chicago, but especially on the Chicago Sports Network. So make sure you tap into all that. It's going to be a great pregame for the Bulls leading into the game against the Knicks. The Simeon Wolverines will be in the building, of course. Tim Flowers will be in the building, head coach of Simeon. And it's going to be, it's going to be a big family reunion. If you're there, soak it all in, get there early, because I heard that they're giving out some special things for that night. So just stay tapped in with it, man, because we're gonna celebrate one of our own that did it at one of the highest levels.
Absolutely.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the By the Horns podcast, presented by Toyota. And know that Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand. So find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. For my guy, Drew Stevens, I'm Cam Smith. Thank you for tapping in to the By the Horns podcast, y'all. Look, Happy New Year. Finish it out the right way. If you're out partying, do it responsibly. Stay safe out on these roads, because we need you back to listen in and watch us. But we always have to give love to everyone that shows love to the Chicago Sports Network and, of course, the By the Horns podcast. Whether if you subscribe, if you share our content, if you like it, comment, all those different things. We are appreciative of you. So Happy New Year to everybody. Happy New Year to our family and friends. We love you guys. We'll see you in 2025.